Good afternoon, everyone. Quick question. Did anyone here use AI to see who was going to win the match last night? And did anyone use that for wagering? I'm David Kleeman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Trends for Dubbit, a research and strategy consultancy and game studio. They're based in Leeds. I'm based in Washington, D.C. In its wonderful, if you haven't read it yet, report on responsible innovation in technology for children, or acronym RITEC, UNICEF and its partners, and you're going to hear more from Adam later about this report, say benefits here benefits in the report refers not only to the absence of harm, but to creating some additional positive value. How should we recognize the opportunities and benefits of digital technology for children and children's well-being? What's the relationship between the design of digital experiences, in particular play-centered design, and the well-being of children? And that's going to be our focus today. So often when we talk about children and technology, children and media, we come at it from a harms-based conversation. So we want to talk today not just about how to avoid that those harms, but also how to ensure, whether it's through design, whether it's through media literacy, whether it's through regulation, whether it's through other means, that generative AI is not just safe, but is also beneficial for young people. We know that generative AI will be attractive and popular. We know that they're already using it. Young people are already using it. And we know that the regulatory side is already on the table at the EU and elsewhere. We're going to begin by talking fairly broadly about generative AI, the ethical implications for children and youth, the importance of introducing AI literacy, media literacy into the teaching early on. And then we're going to talk to three people as well who have been working with it, using it in their work. So talk about some of the practical bases. You may have gone to the session yesterday on practical AI, and that was really about the tools. This is much more about how do we ensure that we're using it in ways that make sense for the young audience, and helping them to use it in ways that make sense. We're going to start out with a short presentation from Very Aitken from the Turing Institute about some of the research that she's been doing. Very.
Thank you, David. Yes, I'm Very Aitken. I'm an ethics fellow at the Alan Turing Institute. The Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science. So in my role as an ethics fellow, among other things, I lead the Turing's work on AI and children. And I'm really delighted to have been invited to speak today. And also really delighted that this is a topic that has been discussed here at this conference, because I think it is so important. Children are the group that will probably be most impacted by advances in AI, but are also the group that are least represented in decision-making around design, development, deployment of AI technologies, and also least represented in discussions around policy and regulation relating to AI technologies. And that's something that really needs to change. Children today are already interacting with AI in many different ways in their everyday lives, children from the earliest of ages. So everything from preschool children playing with smart toys that adapt and personalise through interaction, through to engaging with smart devices in their homes, such as smart speakers, which are not particularly developed or designed with children in mind, but children are increasingly using them as a source of entertainment and a source of information. As children get older, we know that children are, particularly from the age of kind of 7 and above, are increasingly moving away from traditional children's media channels to consuming media increasingly on online platforms such as YouTube, and often short-form content, which has AI, which is targeting and filtering content, personalising that to individual users. As children get older, teens and indeed pre-teens are increasingly interacting on social media platforms, where again AI plays a prominent role in filtering and targeting content towards individual users to optimize or to maximize engagement on those platforms. And that's having an important role in mediating children's friendships, in mediating children's relationships. But AI isn't just mediating relationships or friendships between children, it's also creating new forms of relationship or new forms of friendship. such as through AI companions. The last image on this slide here is Snapchat's My AI. This is a AI companion, a conversational AI chatbot that's integrated into Snapchat. There was a study by Ofcom that was published at the end of last year that reported that around 50% of online teenagers were interacting with Snapchat's My AI. And when we look at teenage girls, it was reported that 75% of online teenage girls were interacting with Snapchat's My AI. So it's really, really significant. But these are just some of the kind of conscious or intentional ways that children are interacting with AI systems. There are also many less intentional ways that children interact with AI. So on a daily basis, children and their families are interacting with AI systems that process information about them or about their families to inform decisions about access to services in education, in housing, in social care, in healthcare, and many, many other areas. The impacts of these decisions or the impacts of the ways that these systems are designed and developed are really significant for children, for their lives today, and for shaping their futures. But children are not generally represented or involved in decision-making around how these systems are designed and developed or around policy and governance relating to these systems. So we often start from adults' assumptions about how children might experience these systems or how children might be impacted from these systems. And that can overlook important understandings of children's actual relationships and actual encounters or interactions with AI systems. That's why in the work that I do at the Alan Turing Institute, we're aiming to address this by developing child-centred approaches to AI. And one of the things that we've been doing over the last 2 years is a collaboration with the Scottish AI Alliance and the Children's Parliament, where we've been working with school children between the ages of 8 and 12 across Scotland, exploring their relationships with AI technologies, exploring their concerns, their interests, and how they feel that AI could be developed in ways that would really benefit children. And over the last year in particular, these children have been engaging with decision makers, including policymakers and researchers and developers, to inform conversations around how we can design and develop AI systems that will really benefit children. When I think about why it's so important to involve children in these discussions, here's a line that you probably hear a lot: children are the future. And this is something that we always hear in policy discussions around children or in discussions around children and technology or children and innovation, that we should engage with children because children are the future. I think that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. Children are not the future. Children are here and now. When we think about AI and involving children in these conversations, we should be focusing on developing, or not just on developing the skills and understanding to enable them to inform decisions in the future or to go into technology roles in the future, but instead recognizing that children today already have valuable insights, that their experiences with technology, their experiences living in a society with technology are valuable to inform decision-making today. And so the reason we engage children is to recognize that they're already impacted by AI technologies here and now, and we should involve them in designing, developing, deploying technologies today to ensure that they have maximum benefits for children and to avoid the risks and to develop appropriate safeguards around technologies. So I'm really delighted that we're having this conversation today and really looking forward to our discussions with the panel on this topic. Thank you.
So I want to come back to that last point about children of the here and now. So often technologies are designed without children in mind or ignoring children's needs and interests. And then we find that we have to go back and fix it later. Almost every technology from the television on to now has been marketed to families as, oh, this is going to be great for your kids. It's going to be so educational and it's going to give them opportunities they've never had. And then they're less important once the technology is penetrated into the market and more profitable audiences come along. Is it still early enough with generative AI to influence that direction and to make sure that children are represented and children's needs are represented from the start?
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. I mean, it could have been earlier for sure. And I think there's a similar problem with how generative AI is developed so far compared to when we look at, say, social media. I mean, with social media, the advances in technology really outpaced advances in regulation and governance, and it was sort of the ways that it advanced was kind of to make those systems entangled in our everyday lives before we fully understood the risks or the harms. And then regulation, where it comes in, is like those systems are already so entangled in our everyday lives that it's really hard to disentangle even when we understand the risks. And that's possibly where we're at with generative AI as well, that these systems are becoming integrated into many of the systems that all of us, including children, are interacting with on a daily basis, the example of Snapchat being one. And it's really, really important that we have these conversations in the early design phases and the development phases, that we're thinking about the potential impacts, the potential harms, and also thinking about the risks and the safeguards that need to be in place at that early stage. I think there definitely still is time, there definitely still is scope, but we need to meaningfully bring children into those conversations and start from a child's perspective, understanding children's experiences and needs in relation to these technologies. And
one of the things that you've spoken a lot about is underrepresentation of different types of children, different, whether it's economic, whether it's gender, race. How do we ensure that in this action that we still have time for, that we're looking at all children, we're looking at making sure that children, whole groups aren't left behind?
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely crucial. I mean, there's big challenges in the way that these technologies are being developed, that not necessarily representing a diverse range of views and perspectives, and particularly minoritized groups, minoritized children. It's really important that we have that representation. And I think when we think practically about the ways of engaging children, engaging with groups that represent children from all different backgrounds, all different areas. There are lots of charities, of organisations, of NGOs that work directly with children across the country and indeed around the world in this space. And I think connecting up the groups of expertise in children's participation with the groups of expertise in technology and innovation is absolutely crucial. It's also important to recognise that this takes expertise in children's engagement and participation, and it's not something that you can just say, let's bring some children into the room. You need to design these systems properly and not really think about how to create impact from those engagements and not just a tick in the box that you've spoken to some children.
I'd add a second E to expertise, and that's economics. That is this going to become a northern wealthy technology for the best uses of it, or are there people already focused on how to ensure that people in developing countries, that kids who don't have access to the newest phone, newest laptop, whatever, are also engaged?
Yeah, and it's really important. I mean, at the moment, we see that, the digital divide is a big concern, and that's both thinking about internationally, but also within different countries. I mean, even here within the UK, the digital divide is very significant. And when we think about access to technologies, there are many, many households who don't have access to reliable internet connection, who don't have access to devices. We're seeing generative AI, advances in generative AI being integrated into, say, educational tools or educational systems. And there are many schools that don't have reliable access to internet or access to devices for children to use these systems. We need to think really, really carefully about how, if this is becoming a set of tools that enable access to personalized learning or to support for education, that this is equitably available to all children. At the moment, that there's a bigger underlying challenge around addressing the challenges of the digital divide and access to the internet, access to technologies that we need to address at the same time to ensure that the benefits of these technologies are realized.
So one more quick question that I think will lead us nicely into the next section, and that is, the examples that you showed of how young people are engaging with AI, obviously Snapchat is a very intentional thing. You know you're doing it. To what extent are kids aware of when they're communicating with, engaging with a generative AI model, bot, whatever?
Yeah, I think that's really important to look at across different age groups. So we have, say, smart toys that are marketed to very, very young preschool children. Toys that maybe take the form of a doll or a pet or an animal that will interact, that will provide feedback and develop a kind of personality or persona that's personalized for interaction. And a lot of these systems are designed, and also the conversational AI chatbots for older children, they're designed to replicate and imitate and to give the impression of talking to something intelligent or something that has empathy or understands. That's a design feature. We don't yet really know what the impact that might have on children's understandings and children's relationships. Of course, on the one hand, it might be that children growing up with these technologies develop a more intuitive sense of what is real and human and what is artificial. But at the same time, there is concern that it could create new confusing encounters and relationships. And we don't yet know. And that's another area where it's really important that we should be thinking about these impacts in the early design phase before these systems are developed and put out into the world, rather than putting them out and then thinking, let's wait and see. That's the wrong way round.
And I knew that would be a perfect transition to Caroline Allens from Natter Hub, who talk a little bit about media literacy. And at what age do you think kids are actually capable of being engaged in media literacy education to understand when they're chatting with an AI and what the implications are?
Well, I think as soon as children are using technology, we need to include some education around it. I think with every aspect of child development where there's potential risk, we have an education that usually precedes independence in that space, whether it's learning to ride a bike or learning to swim. Even crossing the road, there's an understanding that there's a hand-in-hand approach or a support system in place that precedes autonomy in that space, because otherwise the outcome can be very negative. And I think if we think of relationships with technology, it's critical too. Of course, everybody is so impressed with a 12 to 18-month-old baby as so smart. Look, they've learned to swipe across that screen. They must be very clever. And of course, mimicry is a really powerful form of learning. And I think what's important is that we don't confuse the ability for children to cope with the functionality of technology with the ability to cope with the interactivity. And I think that from the get-go, it's important to remember that our parents have an increasingly pressurized role in not just being face-to-face parents, but also digital parents. And we as adults are also very distracted beings. So it's rather a minefield. But I think from the get-go, it's really critical that we understand that with every aspect of risky spaces, that we are hand in hand with our children, and our children are so frequently on their own when they are online. It's an abstract space, and abstract spaces are very difficult for young children to perceive that potential risk. So if you think of all the work that teachers do in primary schools, which of course is a critical phase for social and emotional development, and the constant untangling of friendship issues and falling out on the playground, and these are face-to-face interactions, and this is an ongoing, even as parents reminding, to say please and thank you, and understand you behave in this way in this context, and this place you can behave differently. So then to ask children to apply all of this social and emotional understanding into an abstract space, which, as Veri says, our AI spaces have been designed to be as convincingly real as possible. It's really complex. So I think in its broadest terms, we need to be with our children. We need to be present with our children, whether they are in a virtual space or not, and I think even being present in the context of digital right now is still a big ask, because we're all being very distracted.
Well, and one of the challenges is often when we're teaching our children about media, it's with platforms or devices or technologies that we're familiar with. This is emerging for everyone, so the adults are learning right alongside their children and trying to convey that along. And I can only imagine the teachers who are, as you were saying, are already overwhelmed with the things that they have to do, are saying, now we've got to learn enough about AI to be a step ahead of our kids.
And I think, that's a really important point, because a lot of teachers and parents will say, they know more than I do. I don't know where to begin. This is overwhelming. And I think typically of our education system, which we're probably all in agreement needs a bit of a rehaul, but the propensity to focus on knowledge has been the way that we've attacked online safety and media literacy, certainly in primary schools, which is let's throw loads of new information at teachers and hope that this trickles down to children. But of course, we're dealing with a very fast evolving space. And so to expect teachers to understand everything they need to know about Roblox, Minecraft, Snapchat, that their children might be using, and what the privacy settings are, and how they might be into that one week, but the next thing it's something else. Whereas actually, if we flip this, if we really understand what it means for children to know how to self-protect, at least, when something's difficult to decipher whether it's real or not, let's focus on self-protection. And not wanting to give children the responsibility of their own protection, of course. But if we play to teachers' strengths, this is managing behaviour. Teachers are great at managing behaviour. So if we give teachers the tools to manage online behaviour, and that is giving them the right educational tools, the right tool for the job, to understand more about what it means to be online, to what it means to be using and interacting with AI, then we need to really be focused on soft skill development. These are the soft skills that underpin positive digital citizenship and positive digital behaviour. Because if the technology is neutral, which, that's a whole other argument, then it's the behaviour that determines how vulnerable a child might be.
I'm glad you went on, because you set up my last question for you, which is that I mentioned at the beginning how often media and technology get problematized, how they're portrayed as negatives in children's lives. AI, generative AI, is not going to be all good or all bad. How do we use media literacy to ensure that we cover both sides of that we not only warn but also foster?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, is there anything more boring for children than online safety? Because, of course, they know that it's a list of rules that they never actually apply in real life or in their digital life. Because, I mean, I go into schools a lot and they will happily rattle off, oh, I don't do this and I don't do that and I never do that and I never speak to strangers online. Of course, they're not doing those things because this doesn't reflect our now relationship with technology. And we need to address the elephant in the room for teachers and access to, a different balance of what's priority in very early years and primary education. And I'm sure that there may be people in the room that would rather swap a fronted adverbial for a cracking digital citizenship lesson. But I think it's important that teachers are given the space, the go-ahead, to focus on soft skill development, so that online safety can be turned into a list of do's. Let's do this. Let's practice this. Let's hold hands and enter this space and create learning opportunities that create real impact. Scenario-based situations where children can really use and adopt critical thinking to properly make decisions that are going to affect the way that they behave and the way that they react and the choices that they make when they are digitally autonomous.
So let me open it up to the full panel. I didn't introduce you all. Claire Huang from ITV Studios, Jaffa Asher from Polarity Reversal, and Adam Engel from Lego. Let me open it up to all of you. First of all, did you hear anything in these two openings that either surprised you or that you think needs amplifying, that you'd like to go further into?
I'm just happy to vehemently agree with everything both of them said. So amplifying with just yes. Particularly the points that Veri was making about considering well-being by design and the needs of children before products are released and put into the market. So, yes.
Sorry, is this working? Can anyone hear me? Hi. I was just going to say as well, because I'm kind of going off skew here, because I did plan something. So if I go a bit off. The other thing as well about transparency, and the other thing as well is we're talking about AI, but there is a distinction between AI and Gen AI. Because AI has been around for a while, and it is about using artificial intelligence to make a process a lot faster. What's made a big difference around Gen AI is about the fact that they are creating content. And I'll use an example in a little bit to kind of show the difference with that. But one of the main things that, apart from the educational side and the transparency, there's a word you're going to hear a lot of in the future, and it's called provenance. And provenance is going to be something that a lot of people are going to talk about, because being able to tell the distinction about whether something is real or not, provenance is going to be the key word that you're going to keep hearing about, saying, how are we going to stamp this? And that provenance will work across a lot of different areas. It will work from Canon and who's another camera company? It's been a while since I've done a camera. Kodak, yeah. Canon and Kodak will at their point have to go, when you take a photo, where's your provenance to say that this is real, where the filters are using? When you start using post-production tools like Adobe tools or Midjourney or Runway, any of those, they're going to have provenance labels to say this has been edited at this point. Even to the point that you upload the content into social media platforms, there's going to have to be a mark there to say, here's the provenance, to say this is real, this part is real and this part isn't. that is all still in development, and that is all the bit that from the top down you can try and do with policy, and you can try and do with working with regulation, but from the bottom down is going to develop, like you say, so quickly that as content makers in the room, it's kind of for us to kind of say, we will take, not a pledge or anything, but we as responsible content makers take a responsibility to kind of be open about our provenance, because it's going to be so confusing already as is.
I mean, what you're talking about, I guess, is a little bit about whether a user, particularly a child, can believe what they're seeing. And it reminds me of that old Russian proverb that became big during the nuclear disarmament talks, trust but verify. I mean, you don't want to undermine the idea of trust. You don't want to be suspicious of everything. But you need to understand the possibility. And this is particularly true with anything you do with Gen AI at the moment, where you always have to verify what comes out of it. You can't take anything for granted. But it's also a funny thing. I mean, Very said something about we don't yet know what the impact will be on children in terms of their conversations with Gen AI characters, which basically, for those who don't know, means chatbots that have been given a personality and a certain approach. So it might be a well-known character or something that's created. And of course, with voice coming and then video, these are going to get more and more sophisticated. To me, it's a challenge for us, for those of us, and most of the people in the room are probably storytellers, filmmakers, etc. Our goal generally is suspension of disbelief. It's about creating magic, right? And that's actually the riskiest thing we have going on with these Gen AI characters, because it's in human nature to anthropomorphize. We yell at our computer. And the machines are imitating conversation. They're calculating response. So there's a real danger that the illusion that we want to make as storytellers feeds into the issues that may come. Yet at the same time, there's also serious issues with loneliness, even with children. And there are potential real benefits, personalization of education through chatbots and tutors, lots of things that are potentially incredibly powerful and valuable. So how do we balance these different things? And for us as storytellers, how do we pull back the curtain enough that we make sure that kids understand that there's a little person behind Oz?
Do you think that will cause resistance inside the industry of saying we don't want to, we're the magicians, we don't want to show you how we do our tricks?
Look, I think tech companies have always liked to, Apple's practically built on that. It just works, right? They don't want to talk about how it works. And all of them take that kind of approach. But I think there is a bit of a bigger sensitivity around user education, but it needs to be louder. And certainly none of them have thought, as Very says, about children in this regard. They've built their training on the vast internet miasma, and they're not thinking yet about how to shape that for children. So every tool you're using right now has not been built for children, right? I mean, I don't think, I'm not aware of any.
Built specifically for
Built
children,
specifically in terms of large language models. And, so what do you do about that? What does that mean for us? Is there a different way to train models or a different way to control them? Is there a different opportunity in that?
And I think that's the thing about Gen AI being so new anyway, is a lot of the information you get determines what is produced, so if you've got something where you're going out, so an example that I heard, which was, I always think is a really good example, was a lady who was going to go to court because she hadn't paid some kind of business fees. So she went, I'm going to go to court by myself, I'm going to represent myself, and I'm going to go to ChatGPT, and I'm going to type in all the precedents of cases of similar things that I can then use to go to court. So she typed it in, she got about 14 different county court judgments from different areas, and she presented it in front of the judge, and he went, right, took a look at it, went and did some research. None of them were true. All of them were fake, because the information that had come in wasn't good information. It was just stuff that was out there. It was stuff that was made up. It was stuff that, had maybe been in someone's, story about Harry Potter fan fiction. Who knows? But, it had all been pulled in. And that lack of ability to kind of really filter good quality content and spit something out that is good is something that, again, is still being...
In fairness, I think this is what the big tech companies actually spend a lot of their time trying to deal with. And, the reality is it's not necessarily that the wrong information has gone in, it's just that it makes up information because it's looking to respond to what you've asked it to do. And so if you're going to ask something like that, you have to say, you are a highly trained lawyer, you check facts, you do this, you do that, and make sure that you narrow its behaviors.
We had a lawyer disbarred in the U.S. for doing exactly what you're describing, for submitting cases
Trust
that
but
didn't
verify.
exist. Yes. So this is giving me one small concern. I'm usually an optimist, but I have a concern here. That is, it would be so easy for every level here, for the parents, the teachers, the content creators, the specific AI, generative AI systems, the enterprise AI systems, all to point at the next person on down the line and say, it's their responsibility to fix it. We just build the tools. You figure out how to teach. Yeah.
So there is a group of organisations already that have started to exist, and it's called the I've got to get this right, Content Authority Initiative. So that's been kind of set up by people like, I think, BBC, Adobe, there's quite a few big broadcasters who are involved in that. And they are starting to look at how do we do this provenance side? How do we make sure that, the data that we're getting is clean, I guess, data. So, for example, somewhere like Adobe, the reason it's different from something like Midjourney and Runway is because when they train their AI models, they only train them on the licensed images that they have. So it's not gone out and gone to the whole internet and trying to grab something, which means that they're a bit slower in development, but they're starting to put those guardrails in place. So you will get that, but I think the big change that will happen is when you get a legal case that will then set the precedent. So I think the closest
That's
has been
about
Scarlett
copyright,
Johansson.
Claire, isn't it? And I mean, that's a slightly different conversation, I think. I understand what you mean, but copyright is, we companies are nervous about that because they don't want to use stuff that's based on somebody's copyrighted work, and they know that it's been trained on it.
And some of those software technology companies don't necessarily take that into account when they're building their software. So yeah, sorry.
Oh, you're right. I thought I'd just make the point. So I'm kind of a policy legal person, one of those boring folk, and these questions are being decided in terms of accountability for transparency in different jurisdictions around the world. The EU AI Act, for example, very much makes clear distinctions between developers of AI, so these people building the really powerful foundational models, and deployers of AI, and which transparency obligations sit on them, and which, where there's harm involved and liability involved, where that translates to. So I think in terms of where does responsibility lie, there's the legal responsibility. In terms of where does responsibility lie in order to get the best outcome, it's an ecosystem response. It needs to be, as Vary said, built into the products from the core, but also digital literacy is a huge part of it as well. What we really need to be careful of is when companies basically say, we've built the system, there's risks, here's all the material that you need as a parent or as a child to navigate these risks. It's on you. Well, no, there are going to be risks. You need to understand how to navigate them, but there's also shared responsibility to build safer spaces and positive spaces.
And so in addition to shared responsibility or shared tools, is the people who design it conveying clearly enough to the people who are using it what's gone in, what you can expect to come out, the ingredients list. Javed, let me come back to you for a minute. When we had our panel pre-call, you had an interesting point that said a lot of the issues around generative, I'm having a hard time saying that today, generative AI are really just new expressions or extensions of the problems that we've always had or long had with children and media. It has to do with monitoring behavior, with algorithmic feeds and things like that. Can you talk a little bit more about what you were thinking there?
I have no recollection of what I said at all. But,
I've just told you.
I mean, what I would pick up on in what you've just said is that, we are all very focused on Gen AI at the moment. And, I will say this. I mean, we're sort of talking about a lot of the things that are bad about it. It's delightful at times. It's wonderful at times. If you're okay at something, but you would rather have something that's also okay at it, do it for you and do it reasonably quickly, that's a great thing. There's a lot of wonderful things about these tools. But AI, it's been touched on by various of us along here already, is not just about Gen AI. Until we started talking so dramatically about Gen AI, we spent most of our time talking about algorithms, didn't we, in the media business, and the issues around going down rabbit holes on TikTok and the dangers of that, and the worries we had about how it was polarizing not just society as a whole, but creating obsessions within our kids around things that were unhealthy, bad habits, etc. So, that stuff hasn't gone away, and it's easy, I think, for us to focus on the new thing and forget about the other stuff that surrounds it, which has massive impact on kids' lives. Very's excellent presentation showed us a whole number of things which are right now in your home that incorporate AI that your kids are engaging with, some of them really in a positive way. Again, I mean, keeping kids safe is important, and AI can help do that. Keeping them healthy is important, and it can do that. Creating, I mean, I don't need to go through all the great uses of AI, but so I think that with Gen AI, because it's the first time that we find ourselves at the wheel, we think more about the consequences. It's like I'm always happy to fly on a plane and not worry about it, but if you put me in the cockpit, I'd be terrified, and rightly, because I'd crash the plane.
So if I was in the plane.
Yeah, you should be, but you don't know when you get on that plane whether I'm in the cockpit, and that. So you have to suspend your disbelief, and you take my point. Yeah.
It seems to me we have to avoid turning AI into a dirty word in the same way that we've turned algorithm into a dirty word. That I couldn't start my car in the morning without an algorithm, and yet we talk about, children are being swayed by algorithms. But
look, I'm incredibly excited about children and what they can and will do with Gen AI. I think that the ability to be playful, is actually the most exciting thing about it right now. It can do lots of practical things, but actually it's really fun to play with.
And that seems like, go ahead.
Well, I would just say, that it's like we've very brought it up as well, that this idea that kids understand tech and so on. Of course they don't understand tech. They learn about it because they're willing to play with it. And grown-ups are often not willing to play. So I would encourage every grown-up in the room to play more with Gen AI like you're a kid, and you will learn a lot. You get more fluent by playing, and you discover things that are wonderful, and also things that are annoying, and pain points and problems.
And I'm going to be the parent in the room who's like, but also, like I think you were saying, Adam, in terms of like the responsibility. A lot of these platforms are the tech platforms, and they give you the ability to do it, but they will put the responsibility on you. And also there is a responsibility. Sometimes you will not see in the T's and C's who owns that content once you put it in. Are you putting things in there that once you put in, they will learn from you as well? So as the caution note, sorry, I'm like the bad parent who, can you tell my mum, who will say that bit is just, be careful. But it's brilliant. It is. There are some absolutely ways that it will be really joyful and efficient and provide lots of great things for the industry. But also just take it with a pinch of, there is that side.
Caroline,
Sorry.
a big part of media literacy is also teaching creation, not just consumption. From what you're hearing from Jaffa, do you know of emerging programs to help kids be playful with AI and learn more about what's behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, I really agree with the caution, and I think caution is a really important part of the culture of healthy digital interactions, and creating that culture of healthy caution from the get-go sounds a really simplistic approach, but actually in the same way that, usually the sweets are in a high up cupboard. It's removing that automatic access so that it's untethered, and I think creating that conversation around permission to use for very young children. It's not always going to be like that. You're gently nudging them towards independence, and I think that hand in hand approach is really important for all the different programs that allow children to play. I know that Lego and their programs are just absolutely fascinating for children.
And what a perfect transition.
Yeah.
If we can send Adam the
Oh, yeah,
clicker
I
there.
have a few
Tell us a little
slides.
bit about, I mentioned Rytech at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you for the setup and the segue. That was brilliant.
I planned.
I'm Adam. So I lead digital policy at a global level for the Lego Group. And one thing that we're really proud of is a partnership with UNICEF around this thing called the Responsible Innovation in Technology for Children, which is all about understanding how do you build in well-being by design. You hear a lot about safety by design. You hear a lot about privacy by design. You don't hear so much about well-being by design. And the reason why we want to shift that language is because privacy and safety by design has a negative connotation around digital technology, kind of seeing them as inherently, risky and bad for children. Therefore, safety and privacy, they need to be the overriding factors. They're really, really important, but they're not the only important factors that you need to think about when you're building digital products for children. We've come up with 8 factors here. So you can see that security and safety is one of the key ones. But also for a well-being rounded approach, you need to empower children, to give them autonomy, to build competence, to help them regulate their emotions, to build healthy relationships, to enable their creativity, to help them shape their identity. So holistic, being a child and developing online requires this holistic approach. So this project that we've done with UNICEF examines these different elements, and then we actually trialed it with kids around the world. I think 6 different countries, geographically diverse regions, kids kind of ages 8 to 13, 8 to 12. We tested some video games with them, and then scored them on these different well-being factors and how well they demonstrated competence, emotional regulation, met the metrics, and really the conclusion was fantastic. We found that some games, when designed right, really amplified some of these well-being metrics. So for example, there was one game which had a very kind of open-ended path, choose your own adventure, allowed children to kind of set their own narrative, shape their own destiny. Actions that they made had consequences, and the feedback that we got from one particular child engaging with the game was that she really felt a degree of freedom that she doesn't have in her regular life, her highly regimented regular life. When playing this game, it increased their autonomy, and it was these specific features of design around open-endedness, around consequences and actions and choice that enabled her to have this sense of freedom. That's just one example among many in the framework. So what we're doing now is really looking at, we've got the findings here. We know that digital games, when designed well with this wellbeing framework, can help children build, develop, and grow online. How do we now make sure that companies around the world start thinking about digital design in this way? We're doing this at Lego. We've got now wellbeing KPIs that we measure ourselves against. We're integrating the Rytech design framework into a lot of our digital products. We've also used it to build the Lego digital design principles, which is all about how do you actually design at every single different stage, playful experiences that embed children's voices, use that Rytech competence and wellbeing framework. So it's these kind of toolkits, these frameworks that need to be, I think, embedded in the culture of organizations in order to really lift this thing. And we stop thinking about just compliance risk. We start thinking about, children as digital natives. And if we do this and we see the change happen, I think we'll move away from the conversations about, okay, we need to deny children from the digital space. We need to ban social media. We need to ban access to AI and technology. Until you reach a certain age. That's doing a disservice to children. They have the right to be online. They grow and learn by being online. If we just suddenly introduce them to digital and online spaces when they're 18, they're going to be very ill-equipped to deal with the real risks that are there. So what we need to do, like a playground, is build, protective rails around it. And, there's a soft landing, but there's still some risk. But you've got parents there and teachers there to make sure that they're all right. It's a safer space, but it's not devoid of risk and it's not a sterile space, so they can still learn.
For an audience of content creators and distributors, how would you advise using RITEC guidelines and the digital design principles on a day-to-day basis? How do you incorporate it into the flow of trying to create?
Well, we only have about 50 sets of these digital design principles that are in hot demand at LEGO, so I would be getting massive trouble if I started offering them to. We are trying to get them online so they can be shared more widely. My advice would be to read the outcomes of the RITEC report, look at what UNICEF is doing in this space, and then wait until probably September this year when there'll actually be a guide for business released, which will be basically similar to the LEGO digital design principles, a guide about, okay, if you're a designer, if you're building a game, if you're building digital experience, this is the RITEC framework, this is how you embed it. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible, and that will be available worldwide.
If you can pass the clicker back to Claire, you've brought along with you some examples of how generative AI gets worked into social media in particular.
Yeah, so I could talk
Love to see
about
those.
generative AI and social media for ages, but we don't have enough time in this room. So I'm just going to talk specifically about comments. So comments is something that has been going on social media for a long time, and obviously it's one of the things that make it interactive and help you build a community. And for a long time, obviously, there's been lots of ways of moderating comments, and one of which is, one of the big dangers is spamming. So you get a lot of bots that will come on because if it was a bot speaking to its 2 followers, it basically made no impact. But the minute that bot comes onto your piece of content that's got millions of views and they write a comment, all of a sudden they've reached an audience of thousands of people. So that makes the comment section actually really, really quite an important part of retail space and visibility. So when I was thinking about this, I actually came across this example here. So this was for the trailer for Agatha All Along, which I don't know if anyone knows is the new Disney show that's kind of coming. And this was something that in the past would have been really clunky and simplistic. So Agatha is honestly one of my favourite Marvel characters ever, if not the favourite. I'm so excited. Bro, XA1 802. 8OT is the best thing you said, just perfect. That is a cryptocurrency. So that is a bot trying to sell cryptocurrency. And in the olden days, if this had been that, you basically would have seen a lot of people going, bro, you need to invest in this cryptocurrency. Copy and pasted, same text, regardless of what the content was it was writing on, it would have been the same. Gen AI has changed this now. The difference that it's now done is it has gone into the video of the trailer, it has scanned the information within the trailer, and it has used Gen AI to pull out bits of the trailer that it can then create text that is relevant. So that's how sophisticated it's got. So now they're going to absolute power the trailer holds with Florence's 7 Devils playing in the background. Great call on XA1 802. So again, it's managed to track the trailer, find the sound, hear the track, find where that is and mention it. And my favourite one, which is the reason I've got my phone on me and I couldn't add it on here, but I was not expecting this. I knew that Agatha Harkness was a darker character, but I just figured they'd stick to what was safe from WandaVision. I never thought they'd make the jump from a sitcom to a horror series with the same character. Greatest move today was XA1 806. So you can see the levels of sophistication it is now at.
It's talking to itself.
It's pulling it's pulling in the data from the video. It's seeing what people are talking about. Its voice now sounds genuine, and this is just text.
Yeah.
So if now you look at images and videos... So
Hello,
this
chat. So today I've logged back into the Minecraft server to undertake a very important mission. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, Nigel has been going around griefing both mine and Rishi's bases on the server. I believe it's high time we put a stop to this once and for all. So some of you may be wondering how I plan on getting my revenge. Well, let me show you. I've actually taken the liberty to locate Nigel's favourite spot on the server, which is this little pub you can see here. And before you all start asking, no, this is not the same one where that girl hilariously threw a milkshake over him. So as you can...
So if you think about that, that's sometimes when people go, oh, Gen AI avatars or something, then you're thinking, oh, like artificial images. No, this is how fast this is. This is Gen AI that has taken an image of someone, animated it, taken his voice, changed the shape of his lips, put the text in there, and uploaded, and really quickly, because obviously that milkshakes incident only happened a couple of weeks, so it was really super quick. But this is an important thing that I was saying now about provenance. You can see it says here, when it's been uploaded to TikTok, AI lip sync. So that provenance is really clear. Like, people will watch that and go, and of course, as adults, we will contextually go, of course, Kiss the Hammer is not going to be talking about going into Minecraft, and. But as someone who is talking about something else, if they're talking about beauty product and how well that's worked, or if they're talking about, you've got a phone call that comes through from a number you don't recognise, but it's your mum's voice saying, "Hey, I've forgotten my credit card. Can you just go to mummy's purse and read the credit card out, please?" That is how these sorts of, so that's why this provenance thing is really kind of important, because we, as content and big content makers, can make that problem. But there will be a lot of this going on as well from people who don't care. And we'll take, but yeah, I just kind of want to play it because I just also.
Well, I want to ask you one follow-up on that, but first I want to tell people I'm going to come to you for questions, because I've got a whole list of questions, but I really want to hear what's on your minds, and I'm sure you want to hear what's on your minds. So let me just get your questions ready, and let me just ask as a follow-up. Give me the positive side of this, that if I can create Keir Starmer looking absolutely like he's talking to the camera, there's going to be some great creative, positive uses of it as well. I'm thinking translations of, being able to export your television program to anywhere in the world.
Absolutely, and there are technology already that does exist where you can translate really quickly. So if you've made a piece of content, you've sold it to 250 territories, you need to translate it into that local language. It happens really quickly, using the voice of the people are already doing that as well. So that's one example of where you can use this lip syncing technology to change that and make that really quickly. There will be a lot of people who will be arguing with the parody laws in the US. There will be people who will be arguing about the fair use. Yeah, there'll be lots of people who'll be arguing with fair use. And it will do that thing where what you'll get is, it will get to the point where people will be able to identify this. It's like when photography came along, it didn't mean that people's paintings were no longer valuable. What it meant was that a real painting suddenly had more value, because actually there was this mass-produced way of taking a real photo. So, people then started exploring different ways of painting that wasn't just auto-realistic. So there will be things that will change with this technology as well. But it's I think there's almost kind of different levels, like you were saying absolutely from the beginning, of how we make sure that this kind of goes out into the public conscience, because it will develop a lot quicker than the printing press took to go through, that's the speed.
I also think these exact same technologies you're talking about here for sort of deep fakes, or whatever you want to call them, all this is a bit of a pastiche, can be used to do really creative things and fun things. So you've got to remember that it's a two-sided coin. So the same tech that allows you to take an image of Keir and have him lip syncing to his voice lets you take a photograph and turn it into something fun and entertaining with a song that you've written with, maybe even with another AI. In fact, I've done this myself. And I think there's always two sides. Yeah. It's not about the AI, it's about the people.
Yeah.
And what we choose to do with it.
Questions from you?
Hi, I'm Becky Parry from the Children's Capital of Culture in Rotherham. And I just wanted to, I'm really delighted that you're talking and focusing on education, and wanted to kind of just mention the UK used to really lead the world in media education and had a brilliant model which combined creativity, extending children's cultural engagement and criticality. And I say this because we had a film institute which had an education department which really advocated and made sure that media literacy and film literacy and digital literacy were in the curriculum. And you won't be surprised to know that they are no longer in the curriculum. But also, even more worrying, the film BFI, which was a kind of key institution for promoting media literacy, has had its education department completely removed. So I thought, given our change in legislation, change in governance in the country, and given that we have important people here at the conference, it would be good to just note, make a note of that, and maybe it's time to lobby that we would need to return. That used to be in the curriculum. We had a great model. It was an envy of the world, and we no longer have it. So I would just, it would be great to know your thoughts about whether we can be lobbying to have that return of that position of media literacy in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I probably won't the best answer in terms of media literacy, but in terms of the role of education around AI and AI within that context, I think is absolutely crucial. One of the challenges we have around education relating to AI is it's often seen as like a purely a STEM subject, and so it's integrated into this is about science and technology. And actually, the things we're talking about is it's not just it is STEM, but it's not just STEM. It's actually more about PSHE, so personal sexual health education. It's more about children understanding how these technologies impact their lives, how they impact society, and how they can make informed choices about those technologies. So sorry, that's a little bit off the point of the media literacy, but I think it is in terms of like education and needing to have a more well-rounded approach to education that looks at these technologies and children's role, children's relationships with these technologies, which is also partly media literacy, but is not solely media literacy.
And it seems to me it has to be a coherent, complete thing, that you can't just educate in one area. You have to do what you're saying. Jeff?
Well, I would just say, I mean, part of the reason I'm up here is obviously I work with the Children's Media Foundation on these issues, and I would encourage people to support the Children's Media Foundation because Greg and the group there do amazing work in trying to get our public service values into the minds of policymakers. And this is important too in the world of AI and in this issue around what is AI and what does AI do to the concept of media literacy. We've talked a little bit about it here. Very and I are doing some thinking about it outside of this this forum. But I think I actually it's a critical moment for it. We will wind up with kids who get fluent in this, but they may go through a lot of pain to get there. And if we don't figure out how to make that an intentional process, it could be very damaging. And I think that's sort of been the undercurrent of a lot of the things we've said. So certainly the CMF will try to campaign for this, and I would encourage people to get involved in that.
Adam, is there a global, reaching LEGO being global, are you seeing global emerging efforts to incorporate generative AI into education policy more than?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think generative AI is being considered and implemented in edtech quite a lot. So in the delivery of education, and they're kind of seeing the potential there, and that's causing quite a lot of alarm amongst some policymakers because it is, it is kind of letting the horse out into classrooms without really understanding the implications and the consequences yet. So a lot of the AI legislation has special considerations for the vulnerability of children. So the ambitions of kind of educators to using Gen AI in the classroom is kind of rubbing up against that. In terms of media literacy and Gen AI, I haven't seen so much effort there. I know Ofcom is doing some interesting stuff. We've got a lot of media literacy stuff as a company that we like to push out. But no, I haven't seen it being on kind of the top of any agendas.
On a broader scale. I am afraid that they tell me we have run out of time. We could go on probably for the rest of the afternoon. I want to start by asking you to thank the panel. I want to continue by asking you to thank our producers for this, Nikki Stearman and Emma Cooper here in the front row.